Messiah, which is to make Israel a more religious place and to take certain concrete steps in this regard. And Netanyahu says, I'm definitely doing that.
The Rebbe never visited Israel, not once, and yet from his home in Brooklyn, he was able to influence Israeli politics.
הבטיחו לי בוועד כמה הבטחה שמכל השיחות תהיינה כל עניינים של ויתור על שטחים.
His influence was recognized by American politicians too. US presidents paid homage to him, establishing and proclaiming a National Education and Sharing Day in honor of his birthday.
And please give my warmest regards to the Rebbe on this his 86th birthday.
Menachem Mendel Schneerson was born in 1902 in the Black Sea port of Nikolaev, which was part of the Russian Empire but now part of Ukraine. He and his wife lived in Berlin and Paris before fleeing the Nazis in 1941, seeking refuge in New York, where they put down roots. A decade later, in 1951, he took over the Chabad movement from his father-in-law, who died the previous year. Menachem Schneerson revived and grew the movement for over 40 years until his death in New York in 1994. His followers in Brooklyn were devastated.
Most of them believed he would never die. They still believe Rabbi Menachem Schneerson will be physically resurrected as Mashiach, the Messiah.
A physical resurrection when he's going to come back in his full glory imminently and redeem the entire world.
Currently, the center of the Chabadic movement is in Brooklyn, in a neighborhood called Crown Heights. So it is an American movement in terms of its center, but it is also a global movement. One of the biggest purposes of Chabad is to bring those quote-unquote lost Jews back into Judaism. So Chabad has its own rabbis and emissaries appointed all around the world. It is a global movement.
Headquartered in Brooklyn, the Chabad movement has a presence in every state in America and in over 100 countries around the world, with a particularly high focus in Europe and in Israel. It has hundreds of thousands of followers and runs synagogues, schools, drug rehabilitation centers, and care homes. On the face of it, the movement has been for the betterment of Jews around the world. But according to one analyst, its modus operandi has provided a template for a terror group.
We have good reasons to believe that Fatah got inspired from the Chabad movement. One of the high-ranking members of the Fatah movement was praising the Chabad movement in the sense that the Chabad used to send its emissaries and rabbis all around the world, just like Fatah was doing, sending out teachers to Central Asia and to Africa and to other parts of the world.
For over 40 years, the charismatic Rebbe led the movement. His $1 donations, including to Netanyahu, came with a blessing to his followers and a reminder to give to those less fortunate. A couple of years after this meeting, the Rebbe reportedly told a young Netanyahu that he would one day become Prime Minister of Israel and would be the nation's last leader before handing the scepter to the Messiah. This first part of the Rebbe's prediction came true in 1996, when a 47-year-old Benjamin Netanyahu became Prime Minister for the first time. But his government fell just 3 years later. For a while, Netanyahu withdrew from politics. The Rebbe's words faded into history until a decade later, Netanyahu became Prime Minister for a second time.
העם רוצה שינוי. העם רוצה ללכת בדרך אחרת. הדרך שלנו ניצחה. היא הדרך שתוביל את העם.
Netanyahu's second premiership lasted for over 12 years, until he was eventually ousted by his political opponents. Another setback for anyone who believed in the Rebbe's messianic prophecy. But Netanyahu was back just a few months later, forming a coalition with ultra-Orthodox and religious Zionist parties. He began his third premiership almost exactly a year ago. And it's been a tumultuous year. His hardline government has massively accelerated the construction of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, considered illegal under international law. It's also provoked massive protests by attempting to grab more power for itself at the expense of other branches of government. The protests threatened to bring down Netanyahu's government. But then, on October 7th, everything changed.
Breaking news out of Israel this morning, where Hamas has launched a surprise attack.
A massive surprise attack.
Hundreds of Hamas fighters poured across breached border points.
They attacked by air, land and sea, taking Israel by surprise.
With many in his own country blaming him for the worst security failure in Israel's history, Netanyahu is once again relying on religious language to rally the country.
The Bible says that there is a time for peace and a time for war. This is a time for war.
That kind of language is recognized by evangelical Christians in the United States, who are still able to influence US policy in the Middle East.
Netanyahu took that Bible verse from Ecclesiastes 3.
Netanyahu spent many years living and working in the United States and has always believed in his ability to influence America.
אבל אנחנו הולכים למסלול התנגשות עם הממשל האמריקאי. ארצות הברית זה לא מקשה אחת, זה לא מקשה אחת. יש את הסנאט, יש את הקונגרס, יש את הכוח היהודי שהוא עצום, יותר חזק משהיה אי פעם. יש דעת קהל, יש לנו כוחות כבירים בדעת הקהל שמתנגדים למדיניות הזאת, גדולי הפרשנים. אמריקה לא תכפה עלינו דבר, אם לא נפעל.
And today his relationship with President Joe Biden may not be perfect, but that confidence, at least outwardly, is still there.
בשיחותיי עם הנשיא ביידן ועם מנהיגים אחרים בעולם ובמאמצים רבים אחרים, אנחנו מגייסים לישראל תמיכה בינלאומית כבירה. אנחנו מבטיחים את המשך המלחמה עם עוד תחמושת שמגיעה לארץ, עוד אמצעי לחימה. אנחנו נחסל את החמאס, אנחנו נביא ניצחון.
Today, Netanyahu compares his war with Hamas to Israel's battle with the Amalek in the Old Testament.
You must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible, and we do remember and we are fighting.
The Amalek was one of Israel's arch enemies, and in some parts of the Old Testament, God commanded they should be destroyed. Some commentators believe this is what Netanyahu is signaling with his biblical references.
Amalek is a sign of people what are was evil people, and they try to take away Jewish people from God, to divide them from God and to take them away from God. He's doing the same thing what Amalek has done. He's doing what Amalek has done. So how he coming to speak in the name of the Torah, in the name of the Jewish religion, when he don't believe in the Torah, he don't believe in God?
Benjamin Netanyahu is known to be a secular Jew, but he certainly saw the value in being associated with the Rebbe, whose presence is still felt in Israel even 30 years after his death. Sitting alongside his Zionist and ultra-Orthodox allies, Netanyahu may or may not believe in God, but he certainly believes in retribution, visiting violence of biblical proportions upon the people of Gaza.